inside the mind of someone with ADHD, what is
Mm.
it like?
It is chaotic. I think it's really chaotic. Like you get pulled in so many different directions. So in my background is in finance and consulting, but I would often think about so many other projects that I want to do on the side and never get around to them, or I start them and then never get around to them. So I do think inside like my mind at least is there's just constant sort of, I think the mind is constantly searching for dopamine. So you're constantly looking, thinking of ways to, excite yourself. So whether that's new hobbies or like new projects. So I constantly get pulled in different directions, and it's really frustrating because when you start something, you get slightly bored. You don't want to do it anymore. So I really struggle with that. So it feels like really chaotic. Yeah. So I think a lot of people might relate to that, just feeling chaotic in the
Sure. Can I
mind.
ask you how old you were when you got diagnosed?
Yeah, so I literally got diagnosed 3 months ago, and basically I'm 26 right now, and I think the symptoms got a lot worse or more pronounced with COVID, because I think at university, there's societies and you can do things, manage your own time. No one's telling you what to do. But then at work also, you have your 9 to 5, and I used to go to the gym a lot. Like I used to go to the gym like 4 times a week just to try and get that feeling active and stuff and feeling distracted. But with COVID at home and nothing to do, I think became such a nightmare that I had to go figure out what is going on. And then I did my research and found out that people with dyslexia, I think it's 25% or 50%, might be wrong, but they could also have ADHD because it impacts the similar side of the brain. So I
Mhm.
was diagnosed with dyslexia 6 years ago. And so I knew my dyslexia could have you know could impact that. So that's when I found out I might have ADHD, and so I got diagnosed in December 2020. It's been 3 months, yeah, 2 months since
And
the
how old were you when you got diagnosed?
26, yeah.
26, I see. And did you find that there was something that triggered your diagnosis?
Yeah. It was basically just feeling like I didn't want to work anymore. So just working from home, especially if you're doing like finance, you're like crunching numbers, you're not really talking to anybody. So I ended up just, being really distracted during the day. So I would literally listen to a podcast while I was crunching numbers, or listen to a documentary whilst, doing my work. And I just kept making mistakes and feeling really demotivated, taking naps. And I just couldn't understand why. So I kept thinking maybe it was like depression or something. But then I just did some research and realized my symptoms were really aligned to ADHD. And so that's why I went and got tested. And also because I was underperforming at work so much, like I had to go get tested to like have a reason why. And yeah, it so happened that I got diagnosed with ADHD.
So it's really interesting that you told me about your job, crunching numbers and working in finance. So is that something that you have a natural affinity to?
I think I've definitely been pulled into the finance direction because of interest, right? So as soon as I left university, I went into consulting because I found sort of consulting for companies interesting. But then as soon as like 2 years went by, I got so bored and I thought, finance seems interesting, so let's go there. And also I studied economic history for my bachelor's. So I think like the world of consulting and finance is always quite a common thing to go into if you're studying economics or whatever. So it's definitely, I wouldn't say I'm really good at crunching numbers. It's more like I just followed my interest. And as an ADHD person, you probably recognize that people with ADHD have loads of different interests. So I did, I like numbers, but I also really liked creative stuff. So I draw a lot as well, but I kept that as a hobby and kept like the finance interest as my main job. It has been difficult because to be really good at finance, you need to be 100% focused on the career. And I found myself sort of trying different things all the time. So that has made it difficult.
Right. And so would you say that how ADHD manifests for you is that you couldn't sustain your interest long enough in something if you didn't have that passion burning every day for it?
I think also it's people with, I mean, passion is such a difficult word because I think, especially with me or my ADHD experience, I don't have a passion. I have loads of interests, and I hyper focus on that interest for a certain period of time. So when I was in finance, when I first started, I was like, oh my God, this is amazing. I want to do this. But quickly that dopamine, like, or that interest kind of hits rock bottom. And so I find the next thing to be interested in. So I find like passion is really difficult, at least for me, talking in the context of ADHD, because passion implies one thing, one focus, etc. But unless I'm hyper focusing on something for a short period of time, then that's not really passion, right? It's interests that generate enough passion for that moment of time. So yeah, I hope that makes sense.
Yeah, I mean, like I think when people talk about passion, I think they sort of refer it to a heartfelt,
Yes,
sort of interest or your heartfelt vision for your life. And interest is sort of like multiple and ever changing and, new coming every other day, right? So I think people with ADHD have that propensity to just dive into something they're momentarily interested and then find that, okay, it didn't actually have that heartfelt passion to continue it for life. That's the
exactly. Yeah, and I'd be quite interested to know if other people like with ADHD found an interest that they stuck it out for life. For especially with for me, like I haven't felt that way. I've definitely felt like I've had loads of interests that I would pursue, and I mean, I wish I had a passion, but I don't. It's just interests that may lead into passion, but for maybe a certain time period, and then you want to move on. And I
Mm.
think that's okay as well, because I feel like in our world, people always say you got to have a passion to succeed. And I don't think you need to have a passion, to succeed. I think you need to have passion and drive for like whatever you're doing, but it can change and that's okay.
Yeah, that's true. I think you mentioned that you had depression
Mm.
during the pandemic. Did you find that if you look back in your life, you struggled because of ADHD?
Yeah, 100%.
How? And if so, how did you struggle?
So I think definitely, for example, I think the education system in the UK, I think is really bad with people with ADHD. I think because by 16 you should know what you want to study at college, and then by college you should know what you want to study at university. And I think I really struggled with deciding what route or what path I would take. So I was really creative when I was like 16, but it was like, okay, do I take this path or that path? So I just feel like education system really kind of pushed you into one path or the other, and you didn't really get a chance to explore other creative things, really. So I remember getting really depressed because I was saying, I really want to try a creative route, but I don't really know if you can be successful in that field. And it seems like the best route would be to go to university because that's everyone's doing. And so I just decided to go down like my interest in, economics and history, but keeping that alive. And I think the other depression part is just with ADHD, studying was really hard. So I remember being quite antisocial because I would spend a lot of time studying, sort of after school, in the weekends. And I remember my friends saying, "Why do you study so much?" And I remember thinking, because I don't understand things, can't remember things quickly, and I just really want to do well. So I spent a lot more time in my childhood sort of putting in the extra hours, especially at university too. Put a lot of hours in.
Because ADHD coupled with dyslexia actually, makes it harder for you to comprehend certain things unless you spend double amount of time that everyone is doing. Like,
Yeah, and then you like have a moment where I realize because of my condition, I'm gonna have to work twice as hard as the next person, and that's quite depressing because you can't change that about yourself. The only thing you can change is your mindset towards that realization. But it's really hard to keep that motivation to work hard, double hard as the person next to you because they don't have dyslexia or they don't have ADHD. So that is really hard, I think. And I still kind of struggle with that when I feel my low points with depression. Yeah.
I completely relate to that because I was like you. Like I knew I had the ability to achieve that. I could do well, but I flip-flop between doing really well from getting A to a D,
Mm,
in a subject, and not because I don't know about it, it's because I wasn't paying attention. And
mm,
it sort of dawned on me when a friend of mine said, in order to like get a good grades, you just have to work hard. And it felt like a, pin dropping moment. I was working hard, but obviously it wasn't hard enough, And then I started to really double down and, kind of have this really rigid system, time
mm,
boxing each hour,
yeah,
to motivate myself to study, hyper focusing without tearing my attention away. And that
yeah.
led to being quite boring, because I was just studying all the time and wasn't actually having fun. But I guess it was worth it in the end.
Yeah, no, I totally agree with that. And I think only realizing that that's what you need to do to get things done, I think in a weird way, you become free of being boring because now you know exactly that if you don't want to do this, study this topic or go to do this, then maybe you shouldn't just put time to it because you have to put double the time. And whether can you use that extra time? Like, is that worth your time? So I think in a way it makes you grow up more mentally to say, let's own what we have. And okay, if I'm going to work on something, it needs to be worth my time. And I think that in itself is quite a maturity to reach in order to, free up more time to be yourself and not to work double hard on everything just because that's what you used to do, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it certainly builds character. I think people with ADHD tend to be quite tenacious and driven because they're so used to going against the tide and, just constantly striving. That brings me to the next question, which is I am aware that you must have some ADHD positive personality traits that
Mm.
has allowed you to achieve success in your life. Can you tell me some examples of the time when you have managed your ADHD and channel it towards your interests and your skills in order
Mm.
to achieve something that you were proud of?
Yeah. So I think So I think it's different things. So like when I was in consulting and I found that really boring, I was like, okay, let me move on. What's the next thing that I'm going to do? And for me, I thought, oh, I want to kind of go back to university and do a master's degree. And I think that hyper focus really made me sort of, in my eyes, succeed in my master's because I was just so focused and I got so much out of that year than I did 3 years in my bachelor's, if that makes sense. I didn't get a first, but I don't think that's a reflection of it not being that time not being successful. I just think how you use your time, you need to be more mindful of it now, especially. Well, for me, it was being more mindful of my time and hyper focusing like every day. That was a really successful period of my time where I was like, yeah, I graduate with a master's. This is great in a topic that I really like. And then when I think of like my other successes, I haven't obviously really succeeded at work because right now I've like been underperforming because of ADHD, etc. But I think the motivation to keep growing and understanding myself got to the point where I, got diagnosed with ADHD, and I think that's a new turning point for me because that in itself is success, like learning more about yourself and understanding more about yourself and your strengths and your weaknesses. So I think people tend to think success is as like what you've achieved in your career, but I do think it's a lot more to what you've achieved within yourself. And I think the ADHD part of getting that answer was the last piece of the puzzle I needed to really understand myself and now thrive. So yeah, I'm still really early days in terms of saying, oh, my career has been successful because I don't think it has. Like in my eyes, it's been really messy, but I'm looking forward to like the future and what it brings.
Mm. Yeah, I agree with what you say about achieving this sense of freedom when you know that like you get an affirmation that no, I wasn't lazy, and I wasn't stupid, and it is because I had this self-doubt or something was stopping me from performing, and right now I know exactly what it is, and it's going to allow me to channel the things that I can control and the good parts of me and achieve something out of it.
Yeah, exactly. So I'm really at the early stages of obviously channeling all that good stuff that ADHD brings into something else. And I think um, I'm excited to see what the future holds. And I think a lot of people also say that. Like, I've read on Facebook groups that people who got diagnosed quite late, that was a good turning point for them, because it really made them focus on what they liked, what they didn't like, and really going forward. So um, yeah, I really have been working with a coach about my career. It's still really confusing in early days, and it's really scary because I'm literally walking away from things that I know in my career. But I think with an ADHD diagnosis, it's probably a good time to think what next, and how can I use this power, I guess, or difference, to really make my turn my life around and be more happier, knowing what's going on in my brain, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I'm really excited for you, and also to see if, what will happen from now on, to see the next chapter of your life, where you get to.
Yeah, it's
Yeah, and
good.
perhaps some collaboration as well, in the near future.
Yeah, I think it'll be good. Like, we'll just see. And I think that's the exciting part about getting an ADHD diagnosis. I think the first journey is like you feel confused, you feel alone. But I think the second part, which is the journey I'm on now, is going, okay, so what do I relate to with ADHD? Like, what can I implement that's better? What can I explore about myself? And I think that's really exciting, because that gives you a reason to kind of look at your career or life in a whole different new way, with more possibilities than the prism that you're probably viewing yourself in, as going, oh, I'm too stupid for this, or I can't do this, or I can't do that. I think it's very different. Like, it's more of, okay, I'm probably going to be really shit at doing admin, so I'm not going to do admin ever again, and I think that's okay.
That's
Yeah.
right. And when you have your business growing, you could employ a virtual assistant, someone to help you with the admin stuff, which a lot of people tend to do actually. And
Yeah, I
it's,
think it's a good thing. Like, imagine
yeah.
having an excuse going, oh, I'm not going to do this because I have ADHD, and like, yeah, I'm just not going to be good at it. So it's going to be a waste of my time. And I think it's okay to say that, because you need to use your time effectively. But yeah, so
Yeah.
yeah, that's it about me.
Thank you so much, Kimmy. It's been really lovely hearing your experience.
Thank you so much. I hope that was helpful. Yeah, I'm still very early on in my journey, so I hope it's helpful for people who are very early on in their journey too.